seen the world. So you don't know.
You're not immune from being ripped apart.
Don't tell anyone about your condition. You know what's out there.
You're not gonna scare us.
Scared him?
Welcome back, everybody, to Real Time for the Real Everyday Movie Fan. I am, of course, Josh Williams.
And I'm James Sheridan.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. We are back this week to talk about The Last of Us Episode 2 that aired this past Sunday. I'm hoping moving forward we try and do the review if James will... little peek behind the curtain, guys. James is an old man, so he needs to get to bed early. But if he's down for it, we can try and do the review right at the episode, so I can hopefully get it up that next day, or hopefully Mondays. But last couple weeks, I especially had some stuff going on, but I'll talk that over with James. But I'm excited to get this one going. Not much has changed, James, unless I'm wrong about any new characters. If I'm not mistaken, there isn't in this episode.
No, it's pretty much just the trio of Joel, Ellie, and Tess, and the of course, if you've seen the episode, you know we're introduced to more of the infected and whatnot, but the actual characters and whatnot, it's pretty much just the three of them.
Right. Now there is one person, I'm trying to find her name, and I don't want to leave her out because her scenes were extremely important.
Yes.
The Jakarta, there's a Jakarta mycologist in the beginning of the episode, because what I love so far, I'll bring it up just real fast because we're going to bring her up.
Her name is Christine Hakim.
There we go. Thank you. I wanted to make sure and recognize her because her scenes were amazing. And I'm loving that this show, what it's doing differently from the game, it's giving us more context of things before the outbreak.
And usually I'm not a huge fan of that.
I love it. To me, it gives more weight, because I will explain why I love this scene so much, because it gives more weight to Ellie. But yes, I wanted to give her a huge shout out. So let's just go ahead and dive in. Again, real quick, guys, if you like what we're providing you with these weekly episode breakdowns, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell to receive all of our other great content we have for you here on Real Time. Now, let's get into this, man, James. So let's start off with you. What did you think of the opening scene? Just to start us off.
As I said, I love the opening scene. I'm usually against this kind of providing context for the source of the virus. Usually because my preferred version of zombie lore is,
not knowing.
Is the Living Dead kind of thing, where
right.
There's something supernatural about it. It's literally walking corpses. And the more you explain that, the less interesting that mythology becomes. When you start to give it an explanation for how this thing started, it becomes the mystery is kind of taken away.
Right.
And unfortunately it opens sort of like a door to asking questions about how that origin actually occurs. I find that it's more interesting when you don't know, and especially when the characters don't know. Just everything went to hell very quickly. And when things go to hell very quickly, you don't get a lot of information. There's a lot of misinformation. We, of course, have recently, come out on, not completely, but, we survived a pandemic ourselves kind of thing. And we've seen a lot, just in that short time, how much misinformation was kind of put out there. And I like that aspect of the world where there's a sympathy, an empathy with the audience, where we don't know what's going on and the characters don't know what's going on, and we can kind of relate to the characters because the world is so vague, and you just kind of have to survive and just keep going kind of thing.
Right.
This is different. This is very, very different. One, because the
James, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you up. I just want to remind everybody, if you didn't watch last week's episode, this is your spoiler warning right now. We are going to this episode as if you have seen it. If you have not, go back, watch it, and join back in the conversation. I'm sorry, James.
We won't give any sort of spoilers for stuff to come, because of course we both played the game.
Right.
We know the story and whatnot, and we already have teasers for next week's episode, which I'm looking forward to.
Hell yeah.
But everything we'll discuss is in terms of this and stuff that happened prior to this,
Is
little
pure spoiler.
tidbits from the game, but like it's just about this episode.
Yep.
This one I enjoyed the mystery being sort of unraveled because the it's very important that people understand the fungal infection is not a virus.
Yep.
It's not The Walking Dead. It's not, satellites crashing to Earth. It's not nuclear war. It's not Umbrella Corporation.
Not a monkey.
It's not a
rabies.
Yeah. This is a very specific thing, and it's very different from everything we've understood before. And because of that, that's going to shape how people approach this disease and this infection, and why this infection is so scary. We've had two different experts basically state that there is no cure.
Yep.
And if this gets out, there is no hope for humanity. There's a very chilling scene. This woman goes and investigates this body.
That scene.
And then they investigate her. They ask her basically, like, how do we get out of this? And she says, you bomb the city.
Yep. But you
bomb
saw
the city.
like, what I
Not
loved
just,
in that
you don't just
scene-
bomb the city, you bomb me and my family.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way to stop this thing.
And that's why I love that scene, is because you saw and look at her face like, you have to. Like,
Yeah.
and she's like, that's why she's like, I want to go back with my family, because if you're gonna do this, I want to be like, that scene was so gripping, because to me that adds to the level of importance of Ellie even more so than the game did, because you see, like, there's no, like, I love it, they read it, there's no hope, there's no cure for this, but now we have one, and that to me just reiterates that importance so much more.
But it also, to me, introduces a little bit of doubt into whether or not what is happening to Ellie is something that they can replicate,
Right.
and something they can actually create a cure from, which is so, I'm not going to spoil anything, but that little seed of doubt is going to be so important for things to come.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you give the score of the episode so far? And we'll talk more about more details, but what would you give it?
I thought, I don't know, this one's a little tougher to score because, I mean, the first one had to set everything up, and the first one had to get us pulled into this world, and it was so exciting to see all of that come together. This one felt a little more by the numbers in a way, but at the same time, there's so many little things that work so well. I think I'm still hovering between a 9 and a 10 on this.
9.5 to 10. Okay.
Yeah, and the just for the sake of argument, I'm going to give it a 10. I may revise later, but like there's three big things that happen in this that I really love. One thing actually technically doesn't happen.
Yep.
But if you listen to the commentary of the creators of the show, they tell you very specifically something that's it's a character context, which I'll get to.
Yeah.
Something else I did love about the opening from this is that one of the things I was kind of questioning that they did in this is the changing of the time period, because the game is set in 2013, and the like future sort of 20 years later is 2033. So it was contemporary to when the game came out, because the game came out in 2013. This is different. This is setting it up in 2003, and it's the future is contemporary to our sort of struggle. And I think that's very fascinating in context, because if you remember in 2003, we had the SARS outbreak, and there was posters when they were going through Jakarta of, warnings about SARS. And of course, SARS was sort of a precursor to COVID, and we're now like sort of on the back end of like COVID's still present, but we've sort of like come out the other end of lockdown and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
To me, that the timing of like choosing those periods and that 20-year gap, it gives a lot of sort of interesting real world sort of parallel.
Yep.
And I think the narrative around that is very fascinating. Something else they established there that is fascinating context of the first episode, I don't know if you caught this, is the woman that they have on the slab, the dead woman that they've shot in the head and is infected, they say specifically she worked at a flower factory. And something that I learned through this is that Jakarta has one of the largest flower factories in the world, the largest producers of flour in the world. And something from the game that is clearly indicated in this as well is that it seems to be that it was flour and like wheat products that created, or that transferred the virus from plants to humans.
Right.
Or not virus, sorry, the infection.
The fungal, yeah.
When I say virus, I mean infection. I'm just used
I
to
get what you're
referring
saying.
to.
We're so
all
used
this
to
as
saying it
virus.
because that's
Yes.
just been zombie lore for so long.
Yeah.
Um,
So what's fascinating is if you go back and rewatch the first episode,
Stole my point. Damn it. Go ahead. It's cool. You stole. I had that I had this exact revelation too.
Yeah.
And go ahead. It's okay. Go ahead.
basically the entire time, Joel and Sarah and Tommy are avoiding bread products. Not through like intention, but just little things that happen. There's a moment where the neighbor offers Sarah
Biscuits.
cookies, and
Yeah,
she's
cookies
going to
or
take
biscuits, something. I think it's biscuits.
Yeah, she's going to take the cookies, but when she tells her that there's raisins in it, she kind of like winces and says no. In the morning, Tommy comes over and asks, "Well, I thought we were having pancakes."
Yep.
Because it's Joel's
They didn't eat
birthday.
pancakes because there's
They
none
didn't have
left.
pancakes. They had bacon, or they had eggs and bacon. Joel was supposed to bring a cake home, and he
Never
forgot because of the job. There's also a moment at the very beginning where the male neighbor is feeding the catatonic older lady,
A biscuit.
a tea biscuit or some sort of other biscuit, and it's like all those little things you completely don't notice. Nobody points them out, but because they've laid these seeds, it gives so much more context that these people have just dodged all of these bullets, that any of these moments could have infected them.
Yep.
And
that was the implication, is that because of this flour factory, that this flour ships everywhere,
yeah,
and especially like in big cities, that since they go to the city a lot for the medical stuff, they probably bought flour in the city, made their biscuits and made their cookies, and that's how the lady got infected. And that to me was just like, oh shit, like that makes perfect sense.
mhm,
And to me, that's why I loved, because typically when you think of a zombie infection virus that spreads, you think the nucleus, like the patient zero, and then it spreads from there.
yeah,
This one, it made more sense because it's
in their
fungal
food.
infection started in Jakarta, but because of the shipping, because of that bread place, that's how it spread. It spread in different spots and spread from there. That's why bombing cities made a lot of sense. Like that, like to me, that was like
But what's even more fascinating is that someone, I wasn't paying attention to this, but apparently there's a 2-day difference between the scene in Jakarta where the expert goes to see the woman on the slab and the entire events of like Joel and Sarah.
Yeah,
That's how fast this infection spread.
it spread super fast. It's because of that
2
the
days.
shipping of flour, though. It's because that it happened so fast.
Yeah.
But one of the things I found also fascinating that you realize is that just like, so I've been watching a lot of cordyceps videos, like the fungus of cordyceps, like with the that goes into ants, and I never realized that even after the corpse is dead, the fungus is still alive.
Well, that's
So, like,
that's
for me, like-
that's the fascinating implication of her cutting open the ankle is
Yeah.
that the cordyceps have basically taken over the body. There's no human function that anymore. They are completely in control of this body.
Yep. But then the crazy part is I love that scene where she takes the tendrils or whatever it is out of the mouth and you see them still moving. I was like, whoa.
Not just
And-
moving, but moving towards her.
Yeah.
They are
towards
aware of
yeah.
her presence and trying to reach her.
That was insane. I love that scene so much. But yeah, it made complete total sense how that all that whole scene itself, and just the implication that she knew you have to bomb us all. Like you just have to. Like that. Oh,
Yeah.
that hit me. And to me it enforces. I think you're right about the nugget of doubt, but just that it reinforces so much more than the game did, that how important Ellie is. And that's why I think I love this episode so much, and the one before is it's giving it context to help give the importance of characters and what they're doing, even more so than before in the game.
Yeah.
And I love the game, by the way.
And I love that they can do that now, is that like they've put out 2 games, and that Neil Druckmann can go back, and this is basically like a third revision on
Yep.
his story, a third draft on it, where like things that they couldn't make clearer in the game, or just because of constraints or time or whatnot, they couldn't do in the game, they can now go back and kind of re-emphasize those things. And that's why both of these cold opens have been so effective in
Yep.
giving so much context to what's going on without actually saying so much. It's all visual, it's all little cues, it's all things that you're picking up here and there.
Yep.
But
for
it just
me-
added so much weight.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I love this episode a lot. I'm probably gonna give it a 9.5 again, like last episode. I can't tell you exactly what I didn't necessarily like or didn't like. It wasn't like a 10, like, you know what I mean? Like there was a couple of months where like you were kind of lulling. Like there was a lot of stuff to love though, and there was 2 big things that I noticed that they changed from the game that we need to discuss, and we'll get to that. But the biggest ones I liked was the tension when the
Yeah.
clickers showed up.
I wanted to
Woo!
bring up the clickers because
We'll get to the clickers, but that tension scene was so fantastic. I loved actually the scene between Joel and Ellie. You're getting to see them trying to build, like they were trying to ask each other questions, but they were still like giving each other shit at the same time, and like, you know what I mean? Like you can tell Joel doesn't want to lower down his guard with this girl, but he just is because he can't help it because of who he is at his core. He puts on a hard face like he's some, heartless asshole, but he's really not. We get that from the first episode.
Yeah.
But I love those moments. And for me, the biggest one, which was one of the biggest change ups, was the explanation of the infected with the fungus. And let's talk about this, and we'll talk about the big one, which was Tess's death. That was a big change up for me that I loved a lot. It still worked in the same way, but it was completely different, and we'll get to that. But because they didn't, I remember they said in the behind the scenes, I watched those two at the very end, but it was very different from the game. Because from the game, when the infected die, the spores get released, just like a real cordyceps would. The spores get released, which then it tries to infect other creatures, or insects, because it only does it to ants, really.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Another big change. Just I'll get to I'm going to stick to this point because I don't want to jumble around. But there's one other change that they did here that I liked. But this one, the big difference is it doesn't do that. All it does now is that the fungus spreads, and it could then connect to other zombies to let them know when something happens to it. So like they had a great example, you can hurt one part of the spore or one part of the fungus, and then it will tell another, like a horde of zombies a mile away, and have them come after you. It's like, that's a big implication to how much more careful you have to be with this fungus. What do you think, man? Like, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, there was, I heard them discussing this very point, and one of the things they mentioned about, like, a lot of people are upset that there's no spores, because spores were a big part of the game.
Yeah,
where you had to traverse areas of the map where, you couldn't walk through normally, and you had to try and like sneak through, and it was fascinating because Ellie doesn't need a mask, everyone else needed a mask. Yeah. But the problem is with this kind of storytelling, because faces are so important to our human connection, it's the Spider-Man problem where they're constantly taking off his mask. If you put the gas mask on, you're not going to be able to relate. And the spores wouldn't be self-contained enough to be in just like small specific areas. They would go out everywhere, kind of thing. So it works as a game mechanic. It doesn't work as a storytelling mechanic. And I think the tendrils are a much better, more fascinating way of kind of creating the same sort of drama and problem, but even going further than that, as you said, creating this sort of like network of tendrils across the city, spreading, they said up to a mile. Right. That's there's a moment where, they get to the Capitol building, and like they interact with one of the corpses, and tendrils that are attached to its finger alert other infected further away from the city that we see much earlier in the episode, and creates this sudden sort of like alarm of like, they're coming and now we need to get out of here. And it's so important, because that moment is why they abandoned Tess to her fate, as opposed to like taking her with them, because Joel is trying to keep her alive and doesn't want to lose her. But once he realizes that the mission is lost, and she begs him to take Ellie with him, that the tendrils alerting the infected creates this urgency of like, we just have to go. We can't wait. I can't hesitate. I have to go. So I thought that was masterfully handled, and I love the implications of like, we have to be extra careful moving forward now, because these things are going to be super, super scary, super deadly. And kind of expanding from that, I'm so excited that we got the clickers. Are you still with me, Josh?
No, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay,
continue.
sorry.
I'm having some technical difficulties. I'm just I'm trying to work them out, but give me just one quick second here. But continue, JM.
Yeah, just making sure we didn't lose you.
No, you're still good. I'm still here. I'm just trying to fix my camera.
Clickers are such a fascinating, iconic aspect of these games. Like, we'd never seen a zombie type like that before, and right down to the noise they make and the facial design of like having their entire head encrusted in this like almost coral reef kind of like structure.
Right.
And the only way they can navigate is by echolocation. There's a great moment where Ellie is discussing, like she's asking, have you actually seen this kind of like creature before, where like, is it true that they like use like sonar like bats and whatnot?
Right.
And she alludes to another creature that wasn't in this episode, but we'll get to. And I'm like endlessly fascinated by clickers because they're so iconic and so fascinating, and I was so iffy on whether or not they would actually get it right when I heard the sound that they make, because their sound is so distinct in the trailer. I was super excited, but I was not prepared for how perfect they got these. Like the design of them was perfect. The entire, like you said, the scene where they're encountering them for the first time, the tension in that scene was just, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time.
Same.
They're just as frightening, and like they're so faithful to the point where like I can't believe that we actually got like a live action version that was just perfect, like just exactly the same as the game. That like, oh, that entire sequence was just so well done.
No, I completely agree. Sorry, I'm still having technical issues with my camera. Hopefully I can get it going. But you'll hear my lovely, beautiful sounding voice. I hate my voice. No, I couldn't agree more. I loved every bit of the explanation. Even when they did the behind the scenes, they explained why they didn't do the spores, because even then, like logically within a game it makes sense, but when you think about real world scenario, you wouldn't know exactly. Like you'd also get into that plot hole of, well, how far does the spores actually go? You don't, as far as in the air, so you don't know that exactly. So I thought it was very clever to do to make the choices that they did with the actual fungus, can almost like a single organism in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very, very, very well thought out, in my opinion. And plus, it's the creator of the game, so I have to almost trust their judgment on this factor alone. You know what I mean? But the biggest one for me, was Tess's death. Now we knew it was coming in the game, from the game. Like we played the game, so we knew it was coming. But it still doesn't change the fact that it was done well.
Yeah.
And I love that in the game they don't necessarily talk about how she got bit. She just got bit, and it was implied that it was against the clickers, because there was a moment where she kind of ran off to run away from her own clicker, and that's probably when it happened. But I love that moment that she gets scratched. Ellie gets scratched, and then she like just tells Joel, like, "Look at this. This is real. This is actually possible for Ellie to cure people." And sorry.
No worries.
And that scene alone, and then was just very impactful to the story and to the importance of her sacrifice and for Joel. Like I love the moment too, where he kind of just gives it realization, like, well, she's dead. Like, it is someone who's very important in his life, but he knew there's nothing else he could do, so he just grabbed Ellie and ran. And
but more than that, the importance of that scene is that, like this is the setup for everything. Like them understanding that Ellie's infected is one thing, but Joel is not a person who wants this mission. He's only taking this mission on to get to his brother. But now he's left with this situation where this like person who's very close to him, how close, they don't really define it. I think it's pretty clear that there's some sort of connection between the two of them that is unspoken between the two of them. But she makes him kind of promise that he's going to take care of this kid. And it's that promise that's going to carry him through some really difficult times coming. Again, I'm trying to be vague because I don't want to spoil, but that moment is so important because that promise means everything for what's to come. And I'm glad that they handled it right. Something else about that they discussed in the podcast that fascinates me to no end, and I wish they'd made canon. There was a deleted scene about Tess's background.
Yeah.
Tess is a mother. Tess is a mother.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just want to tell it, like, Tess is a mother Tess was a mother before everything went to hell, and I don't know the ins and outs of this scene, but they were discussing that she, when her husband was infected, she didn't hesitate in killing him, but she
Yeah.
couldn't kill her son. And that in not being able to kill her son, there was apparently a cold open that they had even before the Jakarta stuff of this door and something banging on the door. And it's her son who she locked in the basement 20 years ago and is
Man.
still in there and is trying to get out. And of course, we're never going to see that, and that's not going to give any resolution. But it's so important to the motivation and character development of Tess in this scene, because as they mentioned in the podcast, Tess goes full mother mode.
Yeah.
Once she becomes connected to Ellie and realizes that Ellie is not just the hope for the future, but this child who needs protection,
Right.
she goes full mother mode and is like desperate to try and get this kid to where she needs to go. And I wish they'd left that in, because to me it adds so much to this character that unfortunately we're only going to get for 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And like she's such an impactful character on this story, and it's like it's heartbreaking to watch her go. I know it's necessary for the story, but it's like,
Right.
I wish that extra weight had been there.
And I think that was my negative. Now that you brought it up, it makes perfect sense in my head why I didn't give it a 10, is because that little bit, like, even in the game, you don't really get a lot of her backstory. I just, for sake of a film, you want to feel that connection to a character. So when she died, I was sad because of her connection to Joel and the sacrifice she made, but I didn't feel it. You know what I mean? Like when Joel's daughter died, Sarah, like that hit hard because you cared about her. You cared about what she went through, you know, in those moments. So I think, yeah, you're right. Keeping that in, that could have been only like a 3-minute scene that you could have easily, 3 or 4 minute scene you could have kept in, no problem. And that would have added to the weight of her sacrifice and her death. Because man, what they did change is that, you know, in the game it was the militia going after them and she gets killed or shot, whatever. But this one, whew, the infected are chasing, and so she, you know, blows them up to help save Joel and Ellie. But man, her death was even more gruesome than the game, because the freaking zombie came up to her and stuck its tendrils in her mouth, and I'm just like, oh my god, like holy shit, like oh my god.
But
like,
more than that, what's happening during that moment is that she's dumped all these canisters of gasoline all over this atrium kind of area in this Capitol building, and she's trying to like set them all on fire, make them explode, dumped a bunch of grenades and all that stuff, so like it would blow them all up and give Joel and Ellie a chance.
Right.
And she's trying to light a Zippo lighter, and she's failing to do so.
Yeah.
And as that scene is progressing and this thing is approaching her, and giving her this sort of like horrifying kiss of death,
Yeah.
she's almost giving up. Like her efforts to try and light this thing are slowing down, and like there's a moment where she hesitates and doesn't do it, and then she tries one more time
And it works.
and lights it, and it works. And it like the horror of that kiss and the scene that's approaching her, and of course like either they're going to rip her apart or she's going to explode with them, kind of thing. Either way, her death is going to be awful. The implication of like I've lost my train of thought, but that
okay.
moment was just heartbreaking. And
No, the implication that she's making such a huge sacrifice, but it's almost like her sacrifice was going to be in vain. Like you have that like glimmer of doubt or that shred of doubt that this may not lighten this. This was all for like her trying to sacrifice herself to save them from this horde is going to be for nothing, but it ends up working. It kind of holds you on that breath, like, oh God, is it really? Is it going to light? And that would have, you know, if it didn't, that would have made her death even more horrifying, because it wasn't going to be with a noble, a heroic act. It was just going to be an attempt. And I get that. I get what you're saying there, definitely. But let's go ahead and wrap our thoughts. Those are some of the big things I think we both really liked. Overall, I'll give my thoughts, and you can close us out here, James. This was, I mean, another great episode. It didn't feel like a transitional episode, but then it kind of did, because of the sacrifice of we're losing Tess. But it gives you also a ton more context, which I'm hoping they continue to do with these episodes, to give you a lot more context of what happened before and how it affects what you're knowing about this fungus and how it affects the episode afterwards. Like that Jakarta scene is probably much even better than the 60s one that we got in episode 1. And so great episode 2. I am just beyond stoked for Sunday. And Ellie and Joel are continuing to see the actors. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey are continually to surprise me every time. What about you, man?
This show so far, I know it's only been 2 episodes, has been a fascinating study and adaptation, because the first episode was so faithful but took a little bit of deviation, provided more context. This one took even more of a deviation, but then we get entire scenes where like they're walking across the plank and it's like a shot straight out of the game, and you get the entire clicker sequence which is straight out of the game. And even though Tess's death is a little bit different, it still has that same impact because it's the precursor to everything to come. It's why Joel is motivated to do this. There's so many things that they do so right, and I'm so happy with how it's turning out. And I'm so happy that it's not like a 1-for-1 recreation of the game, and that there's new things and different things, and I'm not sort of lost in being like knowing everything that's going to happen. There's still surprises for me. And like we said, the entire opening sequence where like it gives so much context, not to just what's happening in the story now, but stuff that we've already seen and now get a new light on it. They nailed everything. I just love this so much. The
flower scene it gave me more of like that light bulb moment of, oh wow, that's how the old lady got infected, because of the bread. Like, because they thought it was from the hospital, but no, it was from the flower. And it's just fascinating to me, like how they connect that way.
And it's something that you couldn't avoid because no one would even think that the food is infected, kind of thing. And it's like by the time they get to that point, it's already too late.
Yep. So, all right, folks, that'll do this for tonight for episode 2 of The Last of Us. What did you think of this episode? Leave your comments in the section below. Give us your positive, negatives, and your score out of 10. You can go full spoilers. Just don't give away anything that's going to happen in the very next episodes for all of us who know what's coming up. But leave your comments and share your thoughts. Also, again, if you like what you watched, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to receive all of our great content we have coming for you here on Real Time. The likes and subscriptions, especially the likes, help this video get into the algorithm to get more eyeballs on it. I think me and James do a great breakdown of this episode and give, I think, thoughtful and articulate thoughts. So thank you guys so much for your time. And again, I'm Josh Williams.
I'm James Sheridan.
And thank you for keeping it real
with Real Time.
Good night.
Night.